The stars looked like tiny diamonds against the black canvas of space. Inside the colony ship called New Dawn, a small boy pressed his nose against the cold window glass. His name was Minho, and he was only 7 years old. His eyes grew wide as he watched the purple and gold clouds of a distant nebula twist and turn in the darkness. "Mom, look at that one!" Minho shouted, pointing at the glowing space dust. His mother, Hyejin, smiled at him from across the room. She was a scientist who studied alien plants. Right now, she was looking at some samples under her microscope, but she always had time to look up when her son called. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said warmly. "Maybe one day we'll fly through it and you can see it up close." Minho grinned at the thought. He loved space. He loved everything about traveling between the stars. His mom said they were going to meet some aliens today, important ones from something called the Galactic Council. Minho didn't really understand what that meant, but it sounded exciting. Up on the bridge of the ship, Captain Ji-won sat in his command chair. He was reading reports on a screen in front of him. The ship was getting close to the meeting point. The council had asked them to come to this empty area of space for a diplomatic meeting. Earth wanted to sell food to the aliens. Humans were very good at growing crops, and many alien species wanted to buy from them. A woman named Yoonji worked at the communication station. She was the one who sent and received messages from other ships. Suddenly, her screen lit up with a new message. She read it carefully, then turned to the captain. "Sir, the council ship is sending us a message," she said. "They want us to turn off our defensive shields. They say it's to show good faith and trust." Captain Ji-won frowned. That was a strange request. Ships usually kept their shields up just in case, but humans were still new to space politics. They had only been part of the Galactic Council for 15 years. Maybe this was normal for aliens. He didn't want to mess up the meeting by being rude. "All right," he said after thinking for a moment. "Turn off the shields. Power down the defense guns too." The crew followed his orders. The invisible energy shield around the New Dawn flickered and disappeared. The automatic guns that would shoot at incoming missiles went into sleep mode. The ship was now completely unprotected, floating peacefully in space. That's when everything went wrong. The council ship was huge. It belonged to a species called the Vexarians. Without any warning, bright beams of light shot out from the alien ship. The beams were weapons, powerful ones. They hit the New Dawn and cut through the metal hull like a hot knife through butter. Alarms started screaming throughout the ship. Red lights flashed everywhere. Explosions ripped through different sections. Air started rushing out of the holes in the ship, getting sucked into the vacuum of space. People were thrown against walls. Some were pulled toward the breaches, desperately grabbing onto anything they could hold. In the science lab, Hyejin heard the alarms and knew immediately what was happening. The ship was under attack. She dropped everything and ran to her son. "Minho, we need to get to the escape pods!" She yelled over the noise. Minho was scared. He had never heard his mother sound so frightened. She grabbed his hand and they ran into the hallway. Other people were running too, all heading for the emergency escape pods. These were small ships that could carry people away from a dying vessel. They ran as fast as they could, but the New Dawn was breaking apart around them. Sparks flew from damaged wires in the ceiling. Smoke filled the corridors, making it hard to breathe. Minho coughed and held his mother's hand tighter. They were almost at the escape pod bay when another explosion hit. This one was bigger, much bigger. The blast wave picked them both up and threw them down the hallway like toys. Hyejin wrapped her arms around Minho, trying to protect him with her own body. They hit the wall hard. Pain shot through Hyejin's back and head. Everything started to go dark around the edges of her vision. She could feel Minho's small hand in hers, could hear him crying. She wanted to tell him it would be okay, that they would be all right, but the words wouldn't come. The darkness got bigger and bigger until there was nothing left but silence. On the bridge, Captain Ji-won watched in horror as his ship fell apart. Half of his crew was already dead. The Vexarian ship kept firing, not stopping even though the New Dawn was clearly destroyed. This wasn't a battle. It was murder. "Why are they doing this?" Someone screamed. "We didn't do anything." Ji-won knew he was going to die. They all were. But maybe he could do one last thing. He reached for the communication controls with a bloody hand. He had to tell Earth what happened. He had to make sure someone knew the truth. "This is Captain Ji-won of the New Dawn," he said into the microphone, his voice shaking. "We are under attack by Council forces. The Vexarians fired on us without warning. We powered down our shields like they asked. This was a trap. There won't be any survivors. Tell Earth. Tell them what they did to us." Another hit shook the bridge. The lights went out. G1 could hear the ship's reactor starting to fail. When it went critical, the whole ship would explode. He closed his eyes and thought about his wife back on Earth. He hoped she would understand that he tried his best. The New Dawn's reactor exploded in a flash of white light. The ship and everyone still on it were vaporized instantly. The explosion lit up the empty space for just a moment before fading away, leaving nothing but debris floating in the darkness. 12 people managed to get into escape pods before the end. They were the only survivors out of 347 people who had been on the ship. 73 of the dead were children, kids like Minho who just wanted to see the stars. The escape pods drifted away from the wreckage, sending distress signals. The Vexarian ship didn't chase them. It turned around and left, jumping to hyperspace and disappearing. The alien ship left behind only death and questions. Inside one of the escape pods, a man named Ki-hoon floated in zero gravity. He had cuts all over his face from flying glass. He was shaking, not from cold but from shock. He kept replaying the attack in his mind. They had done nothing wrong. They had followed orders. They had trusted the Council. And the Council had killed them. Ki-hoon looked out the small window of the escape pod at the debris field where the New Dawn used to be. Somewhere in that mess of twisted metal and frozen bodies were his friends, people he had worked with for 3 years. Good people. Innocent people. He didn't know it yet, but his testimony would be one of the pieces of evidence that would change everything. The Council thought they could kill humans and get away with it. They thought Earth would accept their apologies and move on. They were very, very wrong. Back on Earth, in a quiet apartment in Seoul, a woman was cooking dinner. Her name was Sunhee, and she was Hyejin's mother. Minho's grandmother. She hummed to herself as she stirred the soup, thinking about her daughter and grandson out among the stars. She was proud of them, excited for their adventures. In a few hours, military officers would knock on her door. They would tell her that her daughter and grandson were gone. They would say words like incident and unfortunate and regrettable loss. They would offer condolences. But they would also make a promise that would echo across human space and beyond. Earth remembers. Earth protects its own. And Earth never ever forgives the murder of its children. The message from the New Dawn reached Earth Command exactly 4 hours after the attack. The distress signal and Captain Ji-won's final transmission were downloaded and analyzed immediately. Within the hour, every major leader on Earth knew what had happened. The Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake. They had poked a sleeping giant, and now that giant was waking up angry and ready for war. The war room was buried deep underground, 3 kilometers below the surface. It was a massive circular chamber with a huge table in the center. Around that table sat the most powerful people on Earth: generals, admirals, intelligence directors, and politicians. The air was thick with tension and barely controlled rage. At the head of the table sat Secretary General Bowman. She was the elected leader of Earth's unified government. Her face looked tired and pale. She hadn't slept since the news came in about the New Dawn. None of them had. How could they sleep when 347 of their people had been murdered? Admiral Taeyang stood next to a holographic display. He was 73 years old with gray hair and deep wrinkles on his face. He had fought in the resource wars decades ago, back before Earth's nations stopped fighting each other. He knew what war looked like. He knew what it cost. "Play the transmission again," Bowman said quietly. The hologram flickered to life. They watched the security footage from the New Dawn for the 20th time. They watched the Vexarian ship fire on the defenseless colony vessel. They watched it break apart. They heard Captain Ji-won's last words. Some people in the room had tears in their eyes. Others had faces made of stone. "The Vexarian ambassador says it was an accident," Bowman said when the video ended. "He claims we had activated weapon systems. He says their ship felt threatened and acted in self-defense." "That's a lie," Admiral Taeyang said flatly. His voice was calm but cold as ice. "Our data logs are clear. We shut down all defensive systems exactly as they requested. They asked us to make ourselves defenseless. Then they shot us. This was planned murder." General Daeho slammed his fist on the table. He was the head of the Marine Corps, a big man with scars on his hands. 347 people dead. 73 were children. And they want us to say it was just a mistake? They want us to take their apology and some money and forget about it? We can't go to war with the entire Galactic Council, said Young-ho, the director of colonial affairs. He was sweating even though the room was cold. They have thousands of ships. We have maybe 24 modern warships. It would be suicide. I'm not suggesting we fight the whole council, Taeyang said. He touched the holographic controls and brought up new images. I'm suggesting we fight the Vixarians, and I'm suggesting we use ships the council doesn't know about. Everyone leaned forward to look. The hologram showed a spaceship, but it looked nothing like Earth's current fleet. It was huge and blocky, covered in thick armor plating. Guns and missile pods stuck out from every surface. It looked brutal and ugly and dangerous.
What is that?
Asked Somin, the intelligence director. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. This is a Retribution-class battleship, Taeyang explained. When humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel, we didn't know what was out there. We thought we might find hostile aliens. We thought we might have to fight for our survival, so we built these. He pulled up more images. Dozens of similar ships appeared in the hologram, rotating slowly. They were all massive. They were all covered in weapons. They looked like flying fortresses designed for only one purpose: war. We built 312 of them, Taeyang continued. We called it the Colonial Defense Fleet. When we made first contact with the Galactic Council and found out space was civilized, we didn't need these ships anymore. So we mothballed them. We put them in storage and never told the Council they existed. Why not? Bowman asked. Because they're embarrassing, Taeyang admitted. Council ships are elegant. They're fast and efficient. They use energy weapons that are clean and precise. Our old ships are crude by comparison. They use kinetic weapons, railguns that throw chunks of metal at incredible speeds, missiles by the thousands, and armor so thick it's ridiculous by modern standards. Why does that matter? General Daeho asked. Taeyang smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. Because council ships are built for peacetime operations with occasional skirmishes. Our old fleet was built expecting total war. Their ships are faster and prettier. Ours can take a beating and keep fighting. And our weapons? He pulled up technical specifications that made even the general's eyes widen. Our main railguns can punch through any shield system in the known galaxy. One shot can destroy a council dreadnought. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. They were looking at weapons that were deliberately kept secret, hidden away because they were too brutal for civilized space. But now civilized space had shown its true face. Now humanity needed those brutal weapons. How long to make them operational? Bowman asked. 72 hours for basic systems, Taeyang replied. A week for full combat readiness. The ships were built to last. They've been in good storage. We can have a battle group ready to deploy in 3 days. And crews? Already volunteering by the thousands. Half of them have personal connections to the New Dawn. They want this, Madam Secretary. Earth wants this. Bowman stood up and walked around the table. She stopped in front of the hologram, looking at the ugly warships floating there. She thought about Minho, the 7-year-old boy who just wanted to look at stars. She thought about his mother who died trying to save him. She thought about all the others. The council thinks we're soft, she said quietly. They think because we're diplomatic, we're weak. They killed our people to send us a message. To put us in our place, she turned to face the room. What message should we send back? Admiral Taeyang stepped forward. That humanity doesn't forget. That we protect our own. That some species are not meant to be prey. The cost will be high, warned Young-ho. Even if we win, Earth might be isolated. The Council could turn against us completely. Let them, Bowman said. Her voice was hard now, filled with steel. I would rather stand alone with honor than kneel with shame. They murdered children. Our children. We will not accept that. We will never accept that. She looked around the table, meeting every person's eyes. I'm calling for a vote. Do we go to war with the Vixarian Dominion? Do we unleash the old fleet and show the galaxy what humanity is capable of when pushed too far? Hands went up around the table. One by one, every person voted yes. It was unanimous. Then it's decided, Bowman said. Admiral Taeyang, activate the Colonial Defense Fleet. Recall all our ambassadors from Vexarian space. Issue a formal declaration of war. And make sure every species in the galaxy understands our position clearly. What position is that, Madam Secretary? That humanity went into space hoping to find friends. We joined the Council in good faith. We followed their rules and respected their customs. But we will not be victims. We will not allow the murder of our innocents to go unpunished. Any species that stands with the Vexarians will be considered our enemy. Any species that stays neutral will be respected. The meeting continued for hours as they planned the details. But the big decision was made. Earth was going to war. The ancient fleet would fly again, and the galaxy was about to learn a lesson about humanity it would never forget. In orbit around Earth, the shipyards at Lagrange Point 5 came to life. These massive construction facilities had been quiet for years. Now they blazed with activity. Thousands of workers in spacesuits swarmed over the dormant warships, bringing them back to life. The ships had names that reflected humanity's anger. Unstoppable, unbreakable, no forgiveness. Remember them. Righteous fury. Each name was a promise and a threat. In recruitment centers across Earth, lines stretched around city blocks. People wanted to serve. They wanted to be part of the response. Among them was a woman named Sujin. She had been a merchant ship captain before. Her sister had died on the New Dawn. When the recruitment officer asked why she wanted to join, her answer was simple. They need to learn that humans don't just mourn, she said. We make others mourn. They assigned her as second in command of the battleship Unbreakable. Meanwhile, far away on the planet Praxis 7, the Galactic Council was having an emergency meeting. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Chamber. They were arguing about what to do regarding humanity's reaction. The Vexarian ambassador was there. His name was Thrain. He stood before the assembly and clicked his mandibles nervously. Through his translation device, his words came out smooth and apologetic. The incident with the human vessel was truly regrettable, he said. A terrible accident born of miscommunication. We offer 10 million credits in compensation and a formal apology. The human ambassador, Jae-hyun, sat in silence. He was a career diplomat who had spent 30 years building friendships across the galaxy. He had always believed in peaceful cooperation. Now he looked at his supposed friends and allies with new eyes. He saw the calculation in their faces. They didn't care about justice. They cared about convenience. Ambassador Jae-hyun, the council speaker said gently, surely you understand this was an unfortunate accident. War benefits no one. Can't we resolve this peacefully? Jae-hyun stood slowly. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber. You slaughtered a ship full of civilians to send us a message. You thought we would accept it? Because we're new here. Because you see us as weak. Now really, Ambassador, no one thinks. 3 days ago, Jae-hyun interrupted. My government eye commander Min-suk walked through the hangar bay of the battleship Unstoppable. His boots echoed on the metal floor. The ship was enormous. He could barely see the ceiling high above his head. The walls were covered in thick armor plating. In some places, the armor was so thick a person could walk through it like a tunnel. Everything about this ship was excessive. The reactor that powered it could provide electricity to a city of millions. The main gun ran the entire length of the vessel, over 1 kilometer long. Missile pods lined every surface, each pod holding dozens of warheads. This wasn't a ship. It was a weapon designed to look like a ship. Beautiful, isn't she? Said Chief Engineer Nari. She was a small woman with oil stains on her uniform. She ran her hand lovingly along a bulkhead. Everyone called us paranoid when we designed these. They said we were preparing for a war that would never come. Guess they were wrong. How many of the old crew came back? Min-suk asked. About 40% of each ship's original crew volunteered to return, Nari replied. The rest are new recruits and transfers from the modern fleet. But here's the thing, Commander. These ships are simple. Everything is mechanical, not computerized. You can repair most systems with a wrench and some wire. They were built to keep fighting even when damaged. Min-suk nodded, running his hand along a control panel. The buttons were large and physical, not touchscreens. The displays were basic. Everything was designed for function, not beauty. What's the weapon status? The main railgun is online and tested. Secondary guns need another day. Missiles are loaded and ready. Point defense systems are operational. Shield generators are charging. Nari grinned. Give us 72 hours and we'll be ready to go hunting. All across human space, similar scenes were playing out. In the shipyards at Lagrange 5, workers moved around the clock. They didn't sleep. They took short breaks to eat and then went back to work. Everyone knew someone who died on the New Dawn. This was personal for every single person working on the fleet. The ship called Righteous Fury came online first, then No Forgiveness. Then remember them. One by one, the ancient battleships woke from their long sleep. Their reactors hummed with power. Their weapon systems ran diagnostics. Their armor was inspected and reinforced where needed. Each ship needed a crew of 800 people. That meant Earth needed over 250,000 trained personnel to fully staff the fleet. When Earth Command put out the call for volunteers, they got 3 times that many applicants in the first day. Among the volunteers was Sujin, the merchant captain whose sister died in the attack. She stood in a long line at the recruitment center in Tokyo. The line moved slowly, but nobody complained. Everyone was patient. Everyone was determined. When she finally reached the desk, the recruitment officer looked at her file on his screen. Captain Sujin, you have 15 years' experience commanding civilian vessels. Why do you want to serve in a military capacity? Because they need to learn something, Sujin replied simply. Learn what? That humans don't just mourn. We make others mourn. The officer looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded and typed something into his computer. Report to the Unbreakable tomorrow at 0800 hours. You're now Executive Officer, Second in Command. Welcome to the fleet, Commander Sujin. She saluted and walked out with her orders. Tomorrow she would board a warship. Tomorrow she would begin preparing to make the Vexarians pay for what they did. Far away on the neutral planet Praxis 7, the Galactic Council was still meeting. The emergency session had been going on for 2 days now. Different species argued back and forth about what to do regarding Earth's declaration of war. We must intervene, insisted the delegate from the Harmony Collective. The Harmony species looked like tall, thin birds with blue feathers. If we allow this war to proceed, it could spread across the galaxy. We must stop it before more blood is shed. Stop it how? Countered the Eularian ambassador. Eularians were reptilian with green scales and large eyes. Humanity made their position very clear. They withdrew from the council. They declared war only on the Vexarians. If we try to stop them, we become their enemy too. Is that what you want? But the humans are using such barbaric tactics. Another delegate protested. They're threatening total war. That's not how civilized species behave, the Eularian ambassador hissed, which was his species' way of laughing. Perhaps the Vexarians should have thought about civilization before they murdered children. You all know what really happened. This was not an accident. This was the Vexarians testing humanity, trying to put them in their place. Well, now they'll learn their place. You sound like you support this madness. I support justice, the Eularian said coldly. The Vexarians committed an act of pure evil. Humanity is responding. I will not stand in their way. The vote to intervene militarily failed. Only 30% of the council species voted yes. The rest either voted no or abstained. One by one, species that had treaties with the Vexarian Dominion quietly suspended those agreements. Nobody wanted to be on Earth's target list. The Vexarian ambassador Thrain watched his allies abandon him and felt fear growing in his chest. His government had thought this would be simple. Kill a human ship, accept their protests, pay some compensation, and everything would return to normal. Instead, they had awakened something terrible. Intelligence reports were coming in from Vexarian spies near Earth. The reports described massive warships of a design never seen before. Ships that made Vexarian dreadnoughts look small, ships covered in armor and bristling with weapons. The spies estimated the fleet size at over 300 vessels. Thrain's superiors back on Vexar Prime sent him urgent messages. Find a way to stop this, negotiate, offer them anything. But Thrain knew it was too late. He had seen the look in Ambassador Jaehyun's eyes before the human left. That wasn't the look of someone interested in negotiation. That was the look of someone who had made a final decision. Back at the human shipyards, Commander Min-seok was on the bridge of the Unstoppable for the first time. The bridge was huge, bigger than some apartments. Workstations lined the walls. A massive view screen dominated the front. The captain's chair sat on a raised platform in the center, giving a view of everything. Admiral Taeyang stood next to that chair. He was the overall commander of the fleet. He looked at Min-seok and nodded in greeting. Commander, are we ready for departure? All systems are operational, Admiral. Crew is aboard and at stations. We can leave whenever you give the order. And the rest of the fleet? First wave is ready. 12 ships, including ours. Second wave will be ready in 4 days. Third wave in a week. Taeyang sat down in the captain's chair. It was clear he had been thinking about this moment for a long time. Do you know why we're starting with just 12 ships, Commander? To test the Vexarian response, sir? No, to send a message. Taeyang brought up a star map on the main screen. It showed Vexarian territory. He pointed to a system at the edge of their space. This is Kepler 442, it's a border fortress. 3 overlapping shield barriers, 30 warships in orbit. The fortress itself has weapons capable of destroying a fleet. By all military logic, we should avoid it. But we're going straight for it, Minsuk realized. Exactly. We're going to hit their strongest defensive position with only 12 ships. We're going to destroy it completely, and then every Vexarian in the galaxy will understand what they're facing. Sir, even with our advantages, that's a risky move. Taeyang smiled grimly. War's risk, Commander. But sometimes you need to take a risk to prove a point. The Vexarians think they can calculate everything. They think superior numbers mean guaranteed victory. We're going to teach them that some things can't be calculated. Like human anger. Like human determination. Like what happens when you murder our children. He pressed a button on his chair. All ships, this is Admiral Taeyang. Prepare for departure. Our destination is Kepler 442. Our mission is simple. Destroy everything with a Vexarian military designation. Show no mercy. Take no prisoners. Make them understand the cost of what they did. Around Earth, 12 massive battleships fired their engines. They had been sleeping for years, gathering dust in forgotten shipyards. Now they moved slowly at first, then faster. They aligned themselves in formation and activated their hyperspace drives. The drives didn't work like modern ones. They were older, louder, more violent. They tore a hole in space-time rather than gently folding it. When the fleet jumped to hyperspace, the energy release lit up the sky. Anyone looking up from Earth that night saw 12 streaks of light, like falling stars in reverse. On board the Unbreakable, Commander Sujin stood at her station and watched the hyperspace tunnel form around the ship. Colors that had no name swirled past the view screen. She thought about her sister. She thought about little Minho and all the other children who died. She thought about what she was about to do. Estimated time to Kepler 442? She asked the navigation officer. 4 hours, Commander. 4 hours until the shooting started. 4 hours until humanity showed its teeth. 4 hours until the galaxy learned that some species should not be pushed. Some species would push back. And when humans pushed back, worlds trembled. The fleet traveled through hyperspace in complete silence. No one talked much. Everyone was thinking about what came next. Some people were scared. The Vexarian border fortress at Kepler 442 floated in the darkness of space like a metal moon. It was massive, built over 50 years by the best engineers the Vexarian Dominion had. 3 layers of energy shields protected it. Powerful weapons covered every surface. 30 warships patrolled around it in perfect formations. Commander Velisk sat in the fortress control room, looking at his displays with casual boredom. He was a mid-level officer who had never seen combat. Why would he? The Vexarians had the strongest military in this sector. Nobody attacked them. Nobody dared. His job was easy. Watch the sensors, file reports, rotate the patrol ships. Nothing ever happened here. Commander, I'm detecting something strange, said the sensor operator. His name was Tarvik, and his mandibles clicked nervously as he studied his screen. Define strange, Velisk said without much interest. Gravitic distortions at the edge of the system. Multiple contacts. They're big, Commander. Very big. That got Velisk's attention. He walked over to the sensor station and looked at the readings. 12 large objects were emerging from hyperspace. Their energy signatures were unlike anything in the database. They were cruder than modern ships, outputting far more radiation and heat, but their mass readings were enormous. Identify them, Velisk ordered. Working on it, Commander. They're not broadcasting standard identification codes. Wait, I'm getting visual data now. The main screen flickered and showed the approaching ships. Velisk stared at them in confusion. They looked wrong. Modern warships were smooth and elegant. These were blocky and crude, like something from an earlier era of space travel. They were covered in thick armor plating that served no tactical purpose in modern warfare. Energy weapons would punch right through armor. Shields were what mattered now. But despite their primitive appearance, the ships were huge. Each one was twice the size of his largest patrol vessel, and they were accelerating directly toward the fortress, making no attempt to hide or maneuver. Hail them, Velisk ordered. A human face appeared on the communication screen. It was a female, her expression cold and hard. Commander Sujin of the Unbreakable stared at him through the display. "Vexarian forces, this is the Earth Defense Fleet," she said. Her voice was calm but carried an edge of steel. "You are ordered to surrender your station and all vessels immediately. You have 5 minutes to comply." Velis couldn't help himself. He chittered in laughter, a sound his species made when amused. 12 ships against our fortress and an entire fleet? Humanity's reputation for irrationality appears well earned. We respectfully decline your absurd demand. Your choice, Sujin replied. The screen went black. Velis turned to his tactical officer. Bring all weapons online. Tell the patrol fleet to intercept. This will be over quickly. The 30 Vexarian warships moved to attack position. They were sleek and fast, capable of incredible acceleration. They closed the distance rapidly, their energy lances charging. These weapons could cut through the hull of a modern warship like scissors through paper. The human ships didn't dodge. They didn't deploy fighters. They didn't launch missiles. They just kept coming in a straight line, accelerating steadily toward the fortress. When the two forces entered firing range, the Vexarian fleet opened fire first. Bright blue beams of concentrated energy lanced across space. They were beautiful in a terrible way, like lightning made solid. 20 beams hit the lead human ship, the Unbreakable, all at once. The energy splashed across the thick armor like water against stone. It scorched the metal. It burned away paint, but it didn't penetrate. The ship's armor was so thick and the internal structure so reinforced that the energy weapon simply couldn't cut deep enough to cause real damage. The Unbreakable didn't even slow down. What are those ships made of? Someone screamed on the Vexarian command channel. They were about to find out what those ships could do. The human fleet entered railgun range. On the Unbreakable, Commander Sujin gave a single order. Main gun, fire. The kilometer-long railgun that formed the ship's spine activated. Massive capacitors discharged all their stored energy in a fraction of a second. Electromagnetic fields stronger than any natural force accelerated a solid tungsten slug down the barrel. The slug was 3 meters long and weighed 10 tons. When it left the barrel, it was moving at 12% of the speed of light. The kinetic energy it carried was equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The slug hit a Vexarian destroyer in the center. The ship didn't explode in the traditional sense. It simply ceased to exist. The kinetic impact vaporized metal and crew instantly. The slug punched completely through the destroyer and kept going. Its energy barely diminished. It hit a second ship, then a third, destroying both before finally dissipating. 3 ships killed with 1 shot. 11 more main guns fired from the other human vessels. 11 more slugs screamed across space at impossible velocities. 11 more Vexarian ships died. The human fleet didn't stop firing. Secondary railguns opened up, smaller versions that could fire continuously. They filled space with a storm of metal moving at hypersonic speeds. Each slug was only the size of a fist, but at those velocities, they hit with more force than an artillery shell. The Vexarian ships tried to dodge. They activated their shields and maneuvered frantically, but modern shields were designed to deflect energy weapons. They did almost nothing against solid projectiles. The slugs punched through shields like they weren't there, then tore through the relatively thin hulls of the Vexarian warships. "Return fire! Return fire!" Velis screamed from the fortress, but it was already too late. The battle had lasted 7 minutes. The entire Vexarian fleet was gone. 30 ships reduced to expanding clouds of debris, and the human ships hadn't even been scratched. Now they turned their attention to the fortress itself. The 3 layers of shields held for exactly 3 minutes under concentrated fire from all 12 human battleships. When the shields finally overloaded and failed, there was no protection left. Railgun slugs and missiles poured through the gap. The human ships weren't being precise. They weren't targeting specific systems. They were just overwhelming the station with sheer firepower. Thousands of tons of metal and explosives struck the fortress every second. Sections began to break off. Atmosphere vented from dozens of breaches. Power systems failed. The fortress's own weapons tried to fire back, but they were designed to fight modern ships at long range. The human ships were close now, so close the fortress guns couldn't track them properly. Velis watched his command center fall apart around him. Sparks flew from destroyed consoles. The ceiling collapsed. He could hear people screaming as sections of the fortress were torn open to space. His final thought was one of complete disbelief. How could the soft, diplomatic humans be so ruthlessly efficient at destruction? A railgun slug struck the command center directly. Velis and everyone with him died instantly. The fortress broke into 3 large pieces and countless smaller ones. The pieces began to drift apart, their internal fires eventually consuming what oxygen was left. In 15 minutes, the Vexarian fortress that had stood for 50 years was nothing but wreckage. On the bridge of the Unbreakable, Commander Sujin watched the destruction with no satisfaction. Only cold acknowledgement. This wasn't about glory. This was about making a point. "Damage report," she said calmly. "Minor scoring on the outer armor from energy weapons. No penetration. No casualties. All systems fully operational," her tactical officer reported. "Navigation. Plot a course to the next Vexarian military installation. Communications. Send a message to Earth Command. Kepler 442 has fallen. 0 friendly casualties. We're proceeding to the next target." The message reached Earth 6 hours later. It was simple and direct. The human fleet had destroyed one of the Vexarian Dominion's strongest defensive positions without taking a single casualty. The victory was so overwhelming it seemed impossible. But the video evidence was clear. The Vexarian fleet had been swept aside like toys. Their fortress had been demolished in minutes. And the human ships had barely been damaged. Intelligence agencies across the galaxy scrambled to understand what happened. They analyzed the footage from surviving sensor drones. They ran simulations. And slowly they began to understand the terrible simplicity of humanity's ancient strategy. Modern warfare was about energy efficiency and precision. You used energy weapons because they were clean and could be fired repeatedly without needing ammunition. You used light armor because shields did the real protecting. Everything was optimized for long-term operations and minimal resource use. Humanity's old fleet didn't care about efficiency. It used kinetic weapons because kinetic energy couldn't be deflected by shields. It used thick armor because energy weapons needed time to burn through. It carried enough ammunition to fight continuously for weeks, and it had reactors powerful enough to run everything at maximum output without worrying about power consumption. The human ships were crude. They were wasteful. They were everything modern military doctrine said was wrong. But modern military doctrine had never faced an opponent willing to build ships designed purely for destruction. In the Galactic Council chambers, an emergency session was called. The delegates watched the footage from Kepler 442 over and over. 6 weeks had passed since the New Dawn was destroyed. 6 weeks of the human fleet moving through Vexarian space like a force of nature. They struck military bases, shipyards, supply depots, and orbital defense platforms. Every target was destroyed completely. Every Vexarian military asset was reduced to debris. The Vexarians tried to fight back. They gathered their remaining fleets and attempted coordinated attacks. It didn't matter. The human ships were too heavily armored, too heavily armed. In every battle, the Vexarians lost dozens of ships while the humans took minor damage at worst. After 3 weeks, the Vexarian military stopped trying to fight. They began evacuating personnel from military installations before the humans arrived. They pulled back toward their core worlds, hoping to make a final stand. But the human fleet kept coming, relentless and unstoppable. Now, Admiral Taeyang stood on the bridge of the Unstoppable and looked at the planet below. Vexar Prime, the Vexarian homeworld. 8 billion people lived on that blue-green sphere. Cities covered the continents. Orbital stations dotted the space around it. It was beautiful in its way. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple surrender offers from the Vexarian government," reported Communications Officer Hajun. He was a young man, barely 25, but he had aged years in the past weeks. They all had. They're offering complete reparations, territorial concessions, trade agreements, everything we might want. They're begging us to stop. "What do you think we should do, Lieutenant?" Taeyang asked quietly. Hajun looked surprised. Admirals didn't usually ask junior officers for opinions. "Sir, they're offering everything. Maybe we should consider it." "They offered these same things 6 weeks ago," Taeyang replied. "When they first attacked the New Dawn, if they had immediately surrendered those responsible and offered real consequences, maybe we could have avoided this. But they didn't. They thought we would accept their apology and a payment. They thought we were weak." He brought up a tactical display showing every military target on and around Vexar Prime. There were hundreds. Shipyards that built warships, bases where soldiers trained, factories that made weapons, orbital platforms that defended the planet, underground bunkers where generals planned strategy. "They made a choice when they fired on the New Dawn," Taeyang continued. "They chose to test humanity. They chose to see if we would tolerate the murder of our people. Now we teach them the answer to that question. Tactical, are all military targets locked? The tactical officer, a woman named Ariam, checked her displays. Yes, Admiral. Every military installation on the planet and in orbit. 347 targets. She paused, then added softly, same number of people who died on the New Dawn. Taeyang noticed that detail. It wasn't planned, just a coincidence. But it felt right somehow. Weapons free. Fire when ready. Destroy every military target. Nothing else. No civilians, no cities. Only military. The fleet opened fire. Hundreds of railgun slugs and thousands of missiles launched simultaneously. The weapons were precisely targeted. Each one had a specific military installation programmed as its destination. The humans could have destroyed cities. They could have killed millions of civilians. But they didn't. This was punishment, not genocide. Orbital defense platforms disintegrated under railgun fire. Shipyards broke apart. The massive construction facilities torn to pieces. Underground bunkers discovered that there was no depth that could protect against kinetic penetrators dropped from orbit. The tungsten slugs punched through hundreds of meters of rock and concrete before detonating. On the surface, military bases erupted in flames. Weapons factories exploded as their ammunition stores were hit. Training centers collapsed. Command centers went dark as their power systems were destroyed. In 2 hours, the entire Vexarian military infrastructure was reduced to smoking ruins. Not a single civilian building was touched. Not one hospital or school or home. The destruction was surgical and absolute, aimed only at the military capability that had murdered the New Dawn's crew and passengers. When it was done, Admiral Taeyang opened a communication channel to the entire planet. His face appeared on every screen, every display, every device capable of receiving broadcasts. 8 billion Vexarians watched him. "People of Vexar Prime," he said, his voice calm and measured. 6 weeks ago, your military attacked and destroyed a civilian vessel called the New Dawn. 347 humans died, including 73 children. They died because your government wanted to send us a message about our place in the galaxy. He paused, letting his words sink in. I am here to send a different message. Humanity does not accept the murder of our children as the price of diplomacy. Your military has been destroyed. Your warships are debris. Your bases are rubble. Your orbital defenses are gone. But your people live. Your cities stand. Your children are safe. Another pause. This is mercy, not weakness. We could have done much worse. We chose not to. Remember this choice. Remember what happens when you push humanity too far. But also remember that we stopped. We could have kept going. We didn't. The channel closed. Around the planet, the human fleet held position. Weapons were still armed. Defenses were still active. But the shooting had stopped. The message had been sent. Now it was up to the Vexarians to understand it. On the surface, the Vexarian government collapsed within hours. The ministers who had ordered the attack on the New Dawn were arrested by their own people. Citizens who had lost family members in the war demanded justice. The minister who personally gave the order to fire on the New Dawn was turned over to human authorities within a day. There would be a trial on Earth. There would be justice for the victims. But the killing was over. News of the attack on Vexar Prime spread across the galaxy within hours. The Galactic Council convened another emergency session. But this time the mood was different. Before, there had been arguments about intervention. Now there was something else: understanding, respect, even fear. The Eularian ambassador spoke first. We have witnessed something remarkable. Humanity possessed the power to commit genocide. They had every justification. Their people were murdered without cause. Yet they stopped. They destroyed only military targets. They spared civilians. This shows wisdom we did not expect. The delegate from the Harmony Collective stood. She had argued for intervention throughout the war. Now she spoke differently. I was wrong. I thought humanity was being barbaric. But I see now they were being just. They punished the guilty. They spared the innocent. This is not barbarism. This is justice. Other delegates voiced similar thoughts. Humanity had proven something important. They had the capacity for tremendous violence, but they also had restraint. They could destroy, but they chose not to when it wasn't necessary. This combination of capability and control was rare in the galaxy. Ambassador Jaehyun returned to the council chambers. He had been away since declaring war. Now he stood before the assembly again. The other delegates waited to hear what he would say. Humanity wishes to resume diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council, Jaehyun announced. But under different terms. We will not be tested again. We will not be threatened. We will not tolerate attacks on our people. If you harm us, we will respond. Not with negotiations. Not with complaints. We will respond with force. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each delegate. The galaxy thought humanity was soft because we preferred diplomacy. You mistook preference for weakness. We went into space hoping to find friends. We still hope for that, but we will not be victims. The fleet that defeated the Vexarians still exists. It can be brought out of storage anytime we need it. Are you threatening the council? Someone asked. No, Jaehyun replied. I'm making a promise. Treat us fairly and we'll be good neighbors. But if you kill our people to prove a point, you'll learn the same lesson the Vexarians did. The council voted on humanity's return. It was unanimous. Every species voted to accept humanity back under their terms. Nobody wanted to face the ancient fleet. Nobody wanted to test humanity's resolve again. The war officially ended 3 days later. The Vexarian Dominion signed a treaty accepting full responsibility for the attack. They agreed to pay reparations. They agreed to reduce their military. They agreed to never again threaten human space. In exchange, the human fleet would withdraw and allow Vexar Prime to rebuild. Back on Earth, the ancient fleet began to power down again. The ships had done their job. They had proven their worth. Now they would return to their long sleep, waiting in case they were ever needed again. But everyone hoped they wouldn't be. Commander Sujin stood on the bridge of the Unbreakable and watched Earth grow larger on the view screen. The war was over. Her ship was going home. She had done what she set out to do. She had made others mourn, just as she mourned her sister. But she didn't feel triumphant. She just felt tired. War was like that. Even when you won, you lost something. In a memorial park overlooking the ocean, workers finished constructing a monument. It was made of black stone, polished until it reflected the sky. 347 names were carved into the stone. Every person who died on the new dawn. In the center, one name was carved larger than the others. Minho, age 7. Secretary General Bowman stood at the dedication ceremony. Thousands of people gathered to honor the dead. Among them was Sunhee, Minho's grandmay,